Live from the Bob Levy Broadcast Center overlooking the Toms River. It's time to get up, get out, do something. Wake up with Jeremy Grunin. Be a part of the show. 732-505-1160. News Talk Radio WOBM AM 1160 and 1310. Listen online at WOBMAM.com.
Hey, welcome back. Wake up with Jeremy Grunin. Here at the Jersey Shore, it's 7:08 a.m. on Thursday, April 7th. 55 degrees, getting up to 59. WOBM AM 1160 and 1310. News Talk Radio. We're streaming live on the Radio Pup app and, of course, at WOBMAM.com. 732-505-1160 if you want to join the conversation. Of course, I really kind of wanted to accentuate that we're here at the Jersey Shore because our next guest is not. Good morning, John Brooks. How are you?
Good morning, Jeremy, and good morning, beautiful Jersey Shore. Thanks for having me on your show, and I will try not to be too raspy or incoherent at 4 o'clock in the morning Pacific time.
Well, listen, I don't think anybody's feeling badly for you because I'm pretty sure when you wake up, it will be more than 55 degrees. It probably won't rain so much, and you're in California, so it'll be okay.
Well, I think you're right about that. I probably wouldn't want anybody to feel too sorry for me either. Yes, it's usually 60s and sunny, and the rain here is pretty much the rainy season is pretty much over for now.
All right.
We had our share of El Nino.
All right. So, John, you wrote a very personal story, "The Girl Behind the Door." Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about what that's all about?
Sure. It really is a universal story that isn't really confined to East Coast, West Coast. It spreads literally universally. It's a memoir about our daughter, Casey. She was a senior here at Redwood High School in Marin County. Beautiful, smart, popular. She was accepted at Bennington College in Vermont and had her whole life ahead of her. And in January 2008, early one morning, she took the keys to our car, drove to the Golden Gate Bridge, and jumped. And she was never found. So the book is about my search for answers. Why did she do it? Why did a 17-year-old girl who led a pretty privileged life by most standards and had a whole exciting chapter ahead of her, why would she take her life? What did everyone miss, especially the professionals? What did the professionals miss?
Right.
And what could we have done differently to keep her alive? Could we have kept her alive? And so the book, it's a tragic story, of course, but there's a prescriptive element to it in the sense that in the course of writing the book, I did a lot of research and interviews that led me back to Casey's infancy. So she was born in Poland. She was given up at birth by her mother, and as far as we were told, I guess you could say it was a classic adoption story of a mother who wasn't able to care for her child for a number of reasons. So Casey was also a preemie, so she, in all likelihood, went directly from the delivery room to an incubator to an orphanage, where she spent about the first year of her life, and that's when we adopted her. We adopted her at about 14 months old. And what I learned in writing this book is that experience, that early separation and that trauma and the experience of living in an institution, even though she was well cared for, she just didn't have the nurturing and the bonding that I learned too late is crucial to children. It's called attachment disorder.
Right.
And it's something that unfortunately I learned too late. It explained everything about Casey's behaviors later in life. But that's what I share with the reader. It's a story with a learning element to it. What do we miss? What could we pass on to other parents so they could hopefully avoid the tragedy that that affected us.
Right. So how old was she when you adopted her?
She was 14 months old.
Okay. All right.
So she spent about a year in an orphanage,
Right.
and this isn't like the Romanian orphanages that people saw on TV in 1990 in the 2020 expose. I
Right.
mean, it was there were probably about 100 kids there, about a dozen or so caregivers. They were absolute saints, but most of the kids in that facility were in danger of harming themselves. So the staff was really focused on triage and damage control to protect the kids who were most at risk. Because Casey was quiet, she wasn't disruptive. In all likelihood, she may have spent much of the first year of her life in her crib, and it wasn't for anything malicious. It was just simply lack of resources.
Sure. And so was this on some level? I mean, how long after such a tragedy for you did you kind of set about on this journey to write a book about it and to dig deeper into it?
Well, for me, after it happened, January 2008, I just lost all interest in life. Casey was everything to us. She was our only child, and I'm sure as any parent can imagine, if you lose your child, particularly if it's in a very tragic or violent way, you've kind of lost your central purpose in life.
Sure.
So, before this, I was in your business. I did broadcast and media deals for banks, investment banks. I worked for 2 radio groups. And around about a year after Casey died, our whole department was just let go. And I just didn't care.
Right.
Didn't care about work anymore, didn't care about money, didn't care about business, didn't care about career or stuff, all the things that we work for. So it took about a year or two after she died for me to start sitting down and writing a book. I just had a lot of thoughts in my head, a lot of things I wanted to get down on paper, all of my anger, my grief, and everything. And it was through a memoir group in San Francisco that was led by a brilliant writing teacher, former San Francisco Chronicle columnist, that sort of channeled me into making this a book. And I have to credit Adair Lara, our teacher, for seeing the story I completely missed.
Okay. So when we come back, I'd like to obviously, kind of hear about, I guess, a little more about your kind of personal journey into kind of dealing with this and kind of learning through this and kind of get a little more into that. Is that okay?
You bet.
All right, awesome. John Brooks, author and of the Girl Behind the Door, A Father's Quest to Understand His Daughter's Suicide. We'll be right back after this.
Get more Wake Up with Jeremy Grunin at our website, WOBMAM.com. News Talk Radio, WOBM AM 1160 and 1310. Now, back to Wake Up with Jeremy Grunin. News Talk Radio, WOBM AM 1160 and 1310 and WOBMAM.com.
Hey, welcome back. Wake Up with Jeremy Grunin. We're here with John Brooks, author of The Girl Behind the Door, A Father's Quest to Understand His Daughter's Suicide. And John was talking to us kind of like, just kind of going through, how you kind of dealt with this. We kind of have talked about how you, nothing else really kind of mattered for you for some time, which I totally get. I can't, I have 3 children of my own. I can't even imagine how one would go about dealing with that. So at what point did the kind of disinterest in life, for lack of a better term, turn to, hey, let me see if I can go learn more, and let me see if I can't make a difference here for others? Right.
Well, it's I don't know that it was a linear process in a way, and I often ask myself that. why didn't I just check out? Because the temptation was always there. It was just, I have nothing to wake up to the next morning with my daughter gone. It's something that no parent could ever be prepared for. It's just one thing in your life that you just think, it could never, ever, ever happen to me. And I certainly felt that way. So maybe maybe it's force of habit or something like that, you just wake up, you have another day, and you try to go about your business and make the best of it. And I guess it took me a number of years to get to that point. A lot of people just said, well, just get over it and move on. Well, you don't move on from something like this, and there is nothing really to move on to. For me, when I started writing, as I said before, I just had to channel that into something, and before I knew it, I was looking at a book. But I needed help. I was a finance guy.
Right.
Back, I wrote financial prospectuses and credit reports and things like that. So it really took a separate set of eyes to look at what I was doing and see what I completely missed. My first draft was about 450 pages, and it was all about me. And what my teacher pointed out was just almost an obscure reference at the very end of the book, in the epilogue of that first crummy first draft. And she pointed to attachment disorder, and she said, "This is the story. I think this is it." So I turned the whole book around to really focus on Casey rather than me. The final draft was about half as long, and so the story really became about everything I learned about attachment disorder, everything I could have done differently.
So can I ask? And we only have about a minute and a half left in this segment. I'd love for you to stay on for one more, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Can I ask, as an example, what are some of the things? What are some of the things you learned about kind of the signs?
Sure. Well, first of all, attachment disorder is kind of an umbrella term. The medical term is RAD, or reactive attachment disorder, that describes disorders of mood, behavior, socialization, learning that arises from a failure to form normal attachments to primary caregivers. And that could happen to kids who, like Casey, were orphaned. It happens to kids who are neglected, abused, kids in foster care. And they develop certain behaviors that are unusual. For the most part, Casey was a perfectly normal kid, but she had things like crippling meltdowns and temper tantrums, well past what you would consider to be normal for a child her age, and other things as well. And there are other kids who have had experiences similar to Casey who are much further out on that behavioral spectrum than she was. So it describes all of that. But there are a great many kids who have had an early life experience like Casey's who suffer from this and need help.
Right. Okay. So when we come back, John, I'd like to kind of dig in a little bit, because I first of all, I'd like to kind of get your feedback. I can't imagine writing a 450-page book and then kind of realizing at the end, oh my God, I have to go back and take a completely different angle and rewrite it again. So I'd like to kind of understand, maybe you're learning a little bit around this whole process. And then I'd like to talk about what your next steps are, or what you'd like to kind of see happen as you move forward. Is that okay?
Sure, thank you.
All right, John. Be back with John Brooks, author, right after this.
The news never stops at WOBMAM.com. Get the latest from WOBM News, the Town Square, New Jersey News Network, and Fox News Radio. Wake up with Jeremy Grunin. News Talk Radio, WOBM AM 1160 and 1310. Live from Town Square Towers at the heart of the Jersey Shore. Wake up with Jeremy Grunin. Get up, get out, do something. Join the conversation. 732-505-1160. News Talk Radio WOBM AM 1160 and 1310. Listen online at WOBMAM.com.
Welcome back. Wake up with Jeremy Grunin. 7:35 and the red light's not on. Wake up with Jeremy Grunin, 7:35.
I was wondering what that pause was for.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Sorry about that.
We are here with unbelievable with John Brooks, author of The Girl Behind the Door: A Father's Quest to Understand His Daughter's Suicide. And John, I am, how did you feel after you've gone through, obviously this horrible tragedy, and you write this heartfelt book? And you realize after 450 pages that you have to kind of rewrite the whole thing.
Well, it wasn't a matter of rewriting it, but it was more a matter of kind of redirecting my focus.
Right.
And that turned out to be a real epiphany for me. That's where I discovered everything that's now part of the story. When I was redirected to focus really more on Casey and her experience rather than my experience, just remember, we took her to therapist after therapist after therapist to try to get help with her mood swings, with her tantrums, with her defiance, with her self-image, and all the things that I learned now are so common to kids from that kind of a background. I remembered the term attachment disorder that one of her therapists had mentioned, but never followed up on. She, her whole diagnosis was completely different. And so I went to Wikipedia and I looked up attachment disorder, and it just absolutely floored me. It described every single thing about Casey. The mood swings, the inability to self-soothe, and all the rest of the things that I just talked about. And it was just stunning to me that, here it was a simple Wikipedia search that explained everything that everyone missed, and I just couldn't understand how. I understand how I could miss it. I'm not a professional, but how could the professionals miss all of that?
Right.
They knew about Casey's background. They knew about her infancy. They knew about her behaviors, and nobody ever made that connection. And so that's really what started my my journey for the rest of the book. I interviewed adoption experts. I read every single thing I could find on attachment. And what I learned, and sort of the lesson learned that I pass on to parents is that kids who have had this kind of experience early in life need to be treated differently from kids who might be your biological kids. You have to put them first. Parenting them may not be that satisfying hallmark moment. The same goes for therapy. The kind of therapy that attachment therapists use is very different from therapy that kind of a regular psychotherapist would use. What we found was that the therapists, plural, were focused on Casey's behavior. So if she would act up, if she would mouth off, the typical teenager, mouthing off and being rude, they'd say, well, you got to be tougher with her. You have to set boundaries. A traditional therapist would put up a Chinese wall between the parents and the child. And an attachment therapist doesn't do that. And I can't really speak that authoritatively because, again, I'm not a professional. But I would just suffice to say that a qualified attachment therapist knows what questions to ask and how to ask them, and how to get at the root of the child's adoption story that they may not understand or they may not want to talk about. But that's where you separate a good qualified attachment therapist from a run-of-the-mill therapist.
Right,
we thought we had the best ones.
So can I ask, and if you don't want to talk about it, I understand. How How did it affect you and your marriage after this all happened? I mean, did you grow closer? Did you grow further apart? I mean, I know that's the impacts to the living sometimes are more profound, obviously, because it's you're the ones who are left kind of with picking up the pieces.
Sure. Well, when Casey was growing up, and my wife Erica and I were having to deal with these behavioral issues, we had the normal disagreements and arguments that I think parents have with each other. There's usually one who's too easy on the child. There's the other one who's too tough on the child. And so in our case, me being the father of a daughter, I was probably naturally easier on Casey, and Erica wanted to be tougher on her.
Right.
It was also a function, I think, of our upbringing. So, I kind of grew up in a Leave It to Beaver household, and my wife grew up with parents who were Polish immigrants, and so they were old school. After Casey died, this is tough on any marriage, and it takes a toll on a lot of them. And we've been lucky in that respect.
Oh, that's great.
We kind of half joke to each other. We're just kind of stuck with each other. I mean,
right.
Who else does?
Right.
But there was no blame game or anything like that. It wasn't a matter of, well, gee, if you didn't do this, or
right.
There was. There was really none of that.
Well, that's good. So,
yeah.
So John, what's next now? I mean, so you've written the book, and like, do you hope that you can get out and really kind of get out into the world and kind of share what you've learned with others?
Oh, I sure hope so. At this point, I haven't gone back and have no intention of going back to what I was doing before in the business world, as much as I loved it. But I really want to turn to making a difference with kids.
Right.
And right now I've taken on a kind of a second act of sorts, working in the school districts here in Marin County as a substitute teacher and as an aide. But more broadly, I want to get the story out. And, it's a tough topic, but once you get past the optics of suicide, this story really touches people. It touches young people who see themselves in Casey Brooks, whether they were adopted or not.
Right.
They might see their adoption story in her. They might say, oh, my God, I was out there on a ledge, too, and I was about to do what Casey did, and this made me think twice. We hear from parents literally all over the world who see themselves in Erica's and my story. And I think for me the most gratifying thing is to get emails and Facebook messages and other kinds of communication from people who say, you really touched me, you really made a difference, and people who've gone as far as saying, you changed my life. And I thought, gee, what more could I ask for? I mean, that's a lot more gratifying than the paychecks I used to get,
right.
Although they're pretty nice paychecks. But
right.
This is, a lot more gratifying in a very different way. So I just want to get the story out there. I know it touches people when they get a chance to listen to me or read the book.
Right. And so John, where can folks go to find the book and if they want to, obviously read it and really kind of dig into the story?
Sure. Well, it was published by Scribner. It's a division of Simon & Schuster, and it is, I hate to sound like a commercial, but it's available wherever books are sold. So it's either on the shelf or can be ordered through booksellers, Barnes & Noble, your local independent bookstore. It's available on Amazon. It's available from Kindle as a download if you want to get the ebook. So it's out there. I think it's even in Costco.
Great. John Brooks, The Girl Behind the Door, A Father's Quest to Understand His Daughter's Suicide. John, thank you for spending a few minutes with us today and sharing your story. It's super impactful, super topical, and I think parents everywhere can take the lesson and to your point, I think kids everywhere could take the lesson. And I think, it all, like so many of our issues, it starts with awareness, and this is a great first step.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Jeremy, and thanks for having me on your show.
Absolutely. John, why don't you get some sleep, okay?
Okay.
All right. John Brooks, author, The Girl Behind the Door, A Father's Quest to Understand His Daughter's Suicide. Be right back. Wake Up with Jeremy Grunin after this.
Stay tuned for Preferred Company with Joel Markell and Marianne Levy at 8. Wake Up with Jeremy Grunin continues next. News Talk Radio WOBM AM 1160 and 1310.